I was a combat medic in the International Legion for the Defense of Ukraine. What's up, guys? For those of you who are new, I want to give you a little backstory. And then for those of you who have been coming back, which again, I appreciate all the love to watch my videos and whatnot. Thank you, guys. I want to kind of elaborate on some of my duties as a combat medic. So to start out, a little introduction. My name is Saxon, S-A-X-O-N, like Anglo-Saxon. That's my real name. My call sign in Ukraine was Vegas. I know it's going to be backwards on your screen, but Vegas. For a couple reasons. I lived in Las Vegas for a while, and whenever we would play poker in the barracks, I would whoop everybody's asses. So I was Vegas. I was a volunteer firefighter and an EMT in a small town outside Fort Worth, Texas. When Russia initially invaded, I wanted to go help. My initial intentions were not to go fight Russians. It was to help in the medical field. I was currently in EMT school, so I waited till I finished that. That was about 6 months. And then a couple months after that, I went to Ukraine. When I went to Ukraine, I was not familiar with the International Legion. I left Ukraine with a bag full of clothes and a bag full of medical supplies, a one-way ticket, and my plan was to hopefully go to a hospital, maybe a military hospital somewhere, and use some of my new EMT skills or firefighter skills. I even considered joining a search and rescue team out there. When I got to Ukraine, I spent about a week and a half, about 10 days, with both my bags, going door to door, knocking on military bases, hospitals, embassies, pretty much everywhere. And most people said they didn't know what to do with me. And then the other people told me to go home, it's too dangerous. Finally, I came to one Ukrainian military base where I met these two soldiers who were just incredible. And granted, all the Ukrainians I had met up until this point were also awesome. They were all just very grateful that I was there to help. They just didn't know what to do with me. So I ended up meeting these two Ukrainian soldiers, and basically they took me under their wing. They drove me all around town to talk to officers and talk to different departments, figure out what the hell to do. And they ended up taking me to the International Legion Recruiting Center. Here I set up an appointment for the next morning to have an interview, talk with a gentleman named Bullet. He's an American who works in the International Legion. They would decide if I was fit to be in the International Legion or not. The next morning I had my interview. At that time, they were not taking anybody without military experience. I did not have any military experience, but the fact that I had my firefighter and EMT trainings, they allowed me to join. I ended up being in the 3rd Battalion Infantry Brigade in the International Legion of Defense of Ukraine in the Ukrainian Armed Forces. That's a mouthful. Basically, the International Legion was a part, they were contracted under Ukrainian Armed Forces. So we were Ukrainian Armed Forces if you're contracted in the International Legion. I went to Ukraine twice for a total of just about over 4 months, just a little duration of time. I spent about a month and a half of that on the front line. I was lucky enough not to die or get injured out there, which is a very small percentage of people in the Legion. Again, they're an infantry unit. They are on the front line, they fight. International Legion has had elements in every major conflict in the Ukrainian-Russian invasion so far. They are very much on the forefront of this conflict. When I came back to Texas, I took some time off, and I realized what I had just went through was an extremely unique situation. And it's something that I wanted to share on YouTube. So boring shit's out of the way. Let's talk about my job as a combat medic in Ukraine. Spoiler alert, my experience as a combat medic was not this heroic, amazing, like movie superhero job. It was mostly playing the platoon or the squad's mom. Now don't get me wrong, there are some serious medics out there who have been in some shit who absolutely are heroes. I was just in a position where most of my skills were put to use as more of a caretaker in a way. When I was on mission and people were injured, they were instantly killed. There was no me running over and tying a tourniquet on them or trying to stop a bleed. No, the people that were hurt on the missions I was on were instantly killed. It was all by indirect artillery or mortar fire. It's hot as shit in here, so if you start to see me sweating through my shirt, don't give me shit in the comments, please. Right as we started training, I fell into my role as a medic. What does that mean? That basically meant people who got sick, I was the one to check on them. I would be the one to take their temperature, feel their forehead, just like mom. Commanders would give me some of the more serious medicines, some of the narcotics that I would keep. I was the medic. I kept them in a safe, secure location. That was my responsibility. One of my things that the guys will still talk to me about today is every morning I had a bunch of bottles of vitamins. I'd make sure everybody got their vitamin C and their multivitamin every morning. And it got to the point where the guys would just come over to my bunk and they would just hold their hand out and I would just bloop, 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 give everybody their vitamins. I mean, all the way down to the smallest things. Somebody needed ibuprofen, Advil, whatever, they come to me, I give them their stuff. Now, believe it or not, this actually kept me pretty damn busy during training because the base that we were in, the barracks specifically, the barracks that we were in for training was not set up for the amount of people that we had training there. The bathrooms were broken, so there was about, towards the end of my stay for training, there was about 60 of us, 60. There was one working toilet. There is no showers, nothing like that. So it was a cesspool. Everybody was sick. Everybody was at about an 80, a 75%, I would say, of their, their well-being. Everybody was coughing, hacking, sneezing. I ended up getting pink eye in both eyes. I mean, it was absolutely a cesspool. So that made my job a little bit more difficult, running around, checking temperatures. The tough thing is if somebody had a temperature of, I believe we made it over 101, they had to go to the military hospital, and they made them stay for a minimum of 10 days. So nobody wanted to go to the military hospital. So everybody would fight me tooth and nail when I told them, hey, you're sick, you gotta go. A few more of my duties consisted of little things like giving people shots, antibiotics, steroids, maybe their testosterone that's prescribed to them, things like that. And I'm talking about, prescribed steroids. I'm not talking about juice. But don't get me wrong, that's out there too. As far as medical training, one of the main things that we covered was TCCC. TCCC is Tactical Combat Casualty Care. The main objective of this TCCC was to treat the casualty, prevent additional casualties, and then complete the mission. Along the same lines with TCCC, the main casualty or cause of death out in the field in Ukraine is massive bleeds. Having some sort of an arterial bleed or, possibly you lose a limb, and needing to stop that blood flow is absolutely pertinent. It is the most important thing you have to do. Because this is the #1 cause of death on the front, we train tourniquets nonstop, basically to the point where ideally you can just get one on with your eyes closed. Even when we got to the front line, we did more in-depth training where we did more tourniquet care. Also, while we were on the front, we learned the best way to move down casualty, a down soldier. If we have multiple people, how to move them. If it's just us and we have to move them by ourselves, we learn different things like that, which is actually very useful. Again, I never had to use something like that, but if I had to, that training, I knew how to. One of the biggest misconceptions I saw with a lot of the guys who didn't have much medical training was how tight they needed to make the tourniquet. So most people would tie it until it was tight, but they were still relatively comfortable. A lot of people didn't realize, and probably don't realize, that thing is going to be excruciatingly painful. The rule of thumb that we would use would be to tie it as tight as you can until the person wants to start physically fighting you, until the casualty is screaming, and then 2 more twists. Like, it is going to be, you need to completely shut off all circulation to that limb, which hurts like a bitch. And because we trained so hard on tourniquets and they were so important, we also learned that a lot of us were using these cheap Chinese-made tourniquets that were failing on the front line. So a lot of us who had brought our own gear had to get rid of our tourniquets because the command would tell us, yeah, that's the cheap shit. You got to use these, Cat 6 or whatever it is. I'll have a list of some good quality ones. Something I was very grateful for while we were in training was we had a group of volunteers, and I believe they came from Canada. They came with hundreds of AFACs and IFACs, and they basically just gave it to all of us soldiers, all of us infantrymen, to take to the front. And a lot of guys didn't even bring one. So it was very beneficial. The reason AFACs and IFACs are so important is because you need to be able to administer self-aid if you can. A lot of situations out there that we trained on where someone would get hurt, they'd be stuck out in the open, it was an ambush or it was sniper fire, and the medic or the other guys in the unit cannot get to them. So you need to be able to get a tourniquet on wherever it needs to be. You need to be able to, put a chest seal on if you have to, whatever it may be, because you're not going to have that immediate care. And also, it's extremely important to remember, this is Ukraine. This is the International Legion. This is not the United States Army or Marine Corps, where you have a CAS evac team 5 minutes out, they'll come get you, provide the best health care that you need. No, you're on your own. Even if the guys get to you, they're just going to strap on another tourniquet or possibly, depending on how bad it is, give you some drugs or whatever it is. It was pretty much known across the board, if you get hurt, you're on your own, you need to administer self-aid, and it could be hours before somebody comes and gets you. Because of this reason here, we actually saw a lot of United States veterans leave during training or when they immediately got to the front line because they were not used to this. They're used to the American well-oiled war machine that had air support and mortar and heavy artillery and CAS evac teams and QRFs, yet that's just not a thing in Ukraine. They are spread so thin across the line, and Legionnaires are just a small subsection of a group that's already spread thin. So we're spread thin as well. You can see a couple of my photos here. I always kept my trauma shears on my vest or on my plate carrier just in case. I wanted to be able to access that quickly, especially as a combat medic. If you're not in a medic role, I don't know if that's as important for you. You know what I mean? You may want something else there. For me, it was something I definitely wanted quick access to if needed. And I cannot stress enough how important it is to have good quality medical supplies. Being an EMT, I didn't even realize that till I got to Ukraine, how crucial that is. And people are going to give me shit in the comments for that, but it's true. I learned something. I learned a lot while I was out there, but that's just one of the many things. That's a quick breakdown of what it was like being a combat medic for the short time I was out there. Hope you guys liked that. I'm going to have more content coming up. Like, subscribe, do all that shit, and I'll see you guys tomorrow. Love you.